He is unborn.
He is unborn.
Eternal.
Eternal.
Ever existing.
Ever existing.
And qualitatively, he undergoes no changes like the body vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever existing and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls. And owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6 changes of the body. In the Katha Upanishad, we also find a similar passage which reads, Najayate Mriyate Vipashchan, Nayam Kutaschin Na Prabhu Kaschit, Ajo Nitya Shashvato Yam Purano, Nahanyate Hanyamani Sharide. The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in the Bhagavad Gita. But here in this verse there is one special word, vipashcha, which means learning or with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is therefore daytime. As soon as there is light, a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. This consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme Consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are 2 kinds of souls, namely the minute particle soul, Anu Atma, and the super soul, Vibhu Atma. This is also confirmed in the Katha Upanishad in this way. Anor Aniyam Mahato Mahiyan Atmasya Antur Nihito Guhayam Tam Akratu Pashati Vitoshoko Datu Prasadan Mahimanam Atmana. For the super soul, Paramatma, and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated on the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living being. And only one who has become free from all material desires, as well as lamentations, can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul also, as it will be disclosed in the following chapters. And Arjuna is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or by his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. For the soul, there is never birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Om again, that's why she I always make myself notes to give class because, as Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport, I'm forgetful. So, to try to remember some things, I have to make notes because of my forgetfulness. So, there's a saying that when you speak publicly, to know your audience. So, how do I know you? Often that is said, I guess, in a material sense, in a material vein. But to really know you means to know your true existence and your relationships. In other words, when you meet someone, you say, "Hi, my name is such and such." You may exchange a handshake, and they may tell you their name, and then you may go into a further discussion about if they have children, if they're married, so on and so forth, things like this. So you get to know someone through them enlightening you about themselves and their relationship. But all that is pertaining to the body. Generally speaking, when you interact with other human beings on this planet, you're talking about their bodies and the extensions of their bodies and so on and so forth. And, what type of job they may have or what they do. But here, this, as I was preparing to give class, I was just thinking, what would we really know about ourselves if it hadn't been for Krishna speaking by Vedantakrt? And really, what would we really know without Prabhupada's purports? Helping us to understand. This often is, there's a saying in the material world, you can't see the forest for the trees. We can't understand who we are for our attachment to this material body and our senses. These are our trees. In the morning we get up, we go in the bathroom, we look in the mirror, we shave, well, at least the men do. We shave our face. We're looking in the mirror, we're thinking, oh, that's me. That's just part of this illusion we're in right now. We're actually the soul. We're having a human experience. The human experience, we get a body. Now this body is very important. It's described with Krishna. We all know we didn't make these bodies. Krishna made them. They're full of, I believe, 37 trillion cells. They're so complex, these bodies. We could never make these bodies. But Krishna has made these bodies. And the real use of this human form of life is to become self-realized. Who we really are. And therefore, we have the developed intellect in these bodies to ask pertinent questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? Who is God? We see other bodies all the time that can't ask these questions. At our home, we have a cat. We have a dog. They don't ask these questions. We see the birds. We have little bird feeders. The hummingbirds come. They're not asking these questions. So all these other living entities, they don't have that opportunity. We have to make Prabhupada taught us, make the best use of a bad bargain. Any body is a bad bargain. But in this human form of life, we have the opportunity to make the best use of it. To inquire who we are. Why are we here? Why do we have to die? Well, Prabhupada said, you're not dying. You're in the illusion that you're dying. It's just, I just had an uncle who passed away. He was 80-something years old. He was the last relative on my mother's side of aunts and uncles of 12 children. Big Italian family. So he just passed away. So it's just this typical at a funeral there. It's the casket and there's his dead body. Well, I would simply explain what's the difference between the dead body and the human body. The soul is left. Consciousness has left. So we are consciousness. We are the soul. That's who we are. We're not these bodies. ABCs of spiritual life. We are not these bodies. So we utilize this body to the best of our ability to help us become enlightened in spiritual life. So through his purports, Srila Prabhupada is helping us to understand what Krishna is saying. We are extremely fortunate that we have come into contact by the mercy of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada, this movement. Srila Prabhupada actually, I was just listening to a lecture where Srila Prabhupada actually says that this movement is an incarnation of Krishna. Mm-hmm. So, Krishna always comes when there's irreligion. Oh, and it's rampant in this age. But Krishna is here in the form of this movement, in the form of the holy name. So we have to have faith in that and spread this holy name. Srila Prabhupada also has said that ISKCON is wherever his holy name, Krishna's holy name is chanted. Wherever the holy name is chanted. So here we have this wonderful project by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples and grand disciples. And we have a wonderful opportunity here to share our good fortune, to help others become aware of our good fortune and then their good fortune by enlightening them. And hopefully, they will become enthused and as dedicated as the devotees who are living here. And this should be our life and soul, to enlighten others with this wonderful message of Krishna consciousness. And we should, whenever we stress in our movement hearing, listening to others. all of us who have spouses know sometimes we hear the phrase, "You're not listening to me." We've all experienced that to some degree. Right?
Yes.
So that is part of relationships. Listening is a function of relationships. So Srila Prabhupada has given us Krishna speaking. So we just have to learn how to listen. And through his grace, he helps us in his purports understand what Krishna is telling us. Krishna is not just speaking to Arjuna. He's speaking to all of us. So therefore, it's our duty to listen and to abide by Krishna's laws and instructions. Srila Prabhupada always gives a simple example. He would compare the mundane laws to God or Krishna's laws. He would say, you may, in this country, you drive on the right. In England, they drive on the left. But you must, if you live in those countries, you have to follow those laws. You can't drive in your country on the left if they say drive on the right. So similarly, we have to hear and understand what God's laws are and listen to them. And we have to become more and more expert at presenting this wonderful gift to the general populace. We have to become what Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be known as gentlemen and gentle ladies. That would solve a lot of our problems if we actually become gentlemen and gentle ladies. And in our presentation of this philosophy, we have to develop a relationship with others. And that relationship has to be based on knowledge and love. Knowledge is actually a prerequisite of love. How can you love someone or say I love you if you don't know them? Krishna loves us, and his call in Bhagavad Gita is, please come back to me. I love you so much. So we are gradually rekindling our knowledge of Krishna and who we are, who we truly are. We've been so forgetful for so many births, but now we have the opportunity. So let's make the best use of this bad bargain and endeavor to become gentlemen and gentle ladies and present this philosophy to anyone and everyone and develop wonderful relationships. We have to have faith in the spiritual master's teachings and in Krishna. And in this way, we'll see the world will actually change. And our faith shouldn't be just sentiment. It should be rooted in practice, in practically applying this process, in reading these books that Srila Prabhupada gave us, in actually adhering to the lifestyle that he wanted us to adhere to. Simple living and high thinking. And in this way, little by little, anyone who comes in contact with our community here will feel that potency of Krishna. So I'll end there. I thank everyone who's come. All our guests. We are very fortunate, and all of you who are here, please share in our good fortune. If you have Srila Prabhupada's books, thank you very much. If you don't, feel free. There are many here. And we encourage you, please practice this Krishna consciousness in your homes. Remember what Prabhupada said, his ISKCON movement is wherever Krishna's holy name is chanted. So the more that this chanting goes on around the world, the more the world will become purified. So at this time, I'll end. If there's any comments, realizations, questions. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, you brought a nice point about the listening. So vast difference between listening and hearing. So hearing is just hearing. Whereas listening is you digest and then assimilate in your mind and your body of knowledge and follow it. And that is very important. So
Thank you for that comment. I also just want to mention, all of guests who may not know, this is Lakshmi Nrsimha Prabhu. Years ago, in the early days, he would have a difficult time in our movement. Why? You're a PhD, correct?
a master's degree.
Master's degree. Okay. Master's degree. In the early days, we were very neophyte in our understanding of what Srila Prabhupada really meant in a lot of his instructions. So sometimes we would read Prabhupada's books and he would criticize educational institutions as being slaughterhouses. And this was, and then we would neglect to read at other places where Srila Prabhupada said, yes, he wanted, I even heard lectures, he wanted scientists. He wanted scientists to be part of our movement, and so on. So, we're fortunate we have someone who has a master's degree applying that in Krishna consciousness. We want all walks of life in our movement. Everyone is invited. Prabhupada built the house for everyone to live in, so why would we neglect anyone? So we're fortunate to have Lakshmi Nrsimha Prabhu, to have all the wonderful devotees who are living here and rendering so much service. Dwi Puja Prabhu, Mother Vedantakrt, so many of the devotees work so hard in our garden. I don't know, for guests, we have a wonderful garden that's producing so many wonderful vegetables. We have blueberry orchards, fig orchards, so many wonderful persimmons. These are all, what do we know? What do we really know? We take this plant, we put it in the ground, we know it is growing. And you have a tree and it's producing fruit. Do we really understand how all that works? I mean, we think, oh, okay, well, it takes the light of the sun and the moon. We've heard that. We know we need to water it. It's like, I remember Ranganath one time, and Ranganath kind of has a funny way of saying, he said, I can't believe it. I put these plants in the ground and they grow. So, yes, bro.
I want to go back to what you were saying about, in one place Prabhupada might call educational system a slaughterhouse, and another who would say that utilizing education in Krishna's service is an advantage.
Yes.
Can you clarify that contradiction?
Well, I think Srila Prabhupada was, even in his, when we pay our obeisances to Prabhupada, he signifies in his Pranam mantra he's here to shed light on getting rid of impersonalism and voidism. And so educational systems sometimes, they're very impersonal and voidist. They're not enlightening about the reality of the situation. So that's what I think is the difference in true educational system, and utilizing systems of education to be used in the ultimate educational system, which is self-realization, which is to really know who we are, who God is, and what our position is as servants of part and parcel of that supreme.
So all of these universities and university complexes, they don't teach that there's a individual spark called consciousness?
Not that I know of. If you know of one, I'd like to know. Actually, there's some devotees in our movement who are involved in doing that. So hopefully, pray for their success. We're gradually weeding our way in there. Yes, Prabhu.
I was just saying, going back to the when you were talking about the garden, you know, it's easy to think you're the doer. You know, when you're out in the material world working, you know, under say a corporation or company, you know, maybe on a computer or working with machines made by man. But what's amazing about the garden is that it's so in the mode of goodness because of you interacting with God's creations. You're not working with man's creations. You're at the mercy of God's sun and at God's, you know, rain and God's wind and perfect temperature. And if, you know, you don't have sufficient sunlight or water or rain, then you won't get a plant. And even when things are perfect, you still may not get a plant. We put it in the ground and we pray the temperature and everything's right. And even when things, say we go on a 1 week, 2 week drought, you know, then we have to sprinkle things. But even with sprinkling, we may not reach everything. So it's, you know, and that's the beauty of self-sufficiency and living in a simple, you know, environment. And because you're constantly reminded of how much you're at the mercy of Krishna.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Like your granddad says, there ain't no such thing as a weed. You just don't know what it's for. Ain't no such thing as a weed.
Yeah. Except for crabgrass.
Any other comments? Accusations?
Well, there's a story about the cobbler and the Brahmin talking about plants. And, you know, for those people who don't know, there's a great sage in our line of spiritual masters named Narada Muni. And he has the ability, he has a free, you know, passport. He can go anywhere in the material world, anywhere in the spiritual world. He can travel. So he stops by and he sees one Brahmin. And he says, I'm on my way to see Lord Ryan, which is another name for Krishna. Is there anything that you would like me to ask? And he says, yes, I would like to know when Narayan is going to arrange for my transfer from this material plane back to the eternal world. I'm performing all my Shastric duties here and doing my pujas. So I would like you to ask the choir, when can I expect to go back to home? Narada says, sure, I'll do this for you. Then he sees a cobbler. And the cobbler's like the lowest on the chain because he's making shoes from dead animals. They're allowed to, if some cow dies naturally, they can use the leather for making sandals, shoes. So he's considered untouchable. So he also asks the same question, when am I going to get a chance to go back to the spiritual world? How many more lifetimes do I have? So Narada Muni goes back and after having a nice visit with Lord Narayan, he says, so there's this Brahmin, he identifies the Brahmin. He wanted to know when he'll be returning back to the spiritual world. And Narayan says, it'll be a few more lifetimes. He has some work to do still. And then Narayan was a little surprised. And then he asked, well, there's a Kabul also in the same village. He was asking, when is he coming back? He said, the next lifetime. His next lifetime. And Narayan was, after this is his last lifetime. He's coming back home very soon. And Narayan is confused by this. How is this possible? This one is a cobbler. He's handling, he's making sandals from the body of the dead animals. And this person over here is, everything is suchi, everything is sattvic, he's performing proper rituals. He knows Shastra. Why does he have so many more lifetimes? Well, when you go back, you say, if they, I can't remember exactly how it goes. They'll ask you, what was I doing? And and you tell them that Lord Narayan was taking a camel and he was threading it through the eye of a needle.
Elephant.
What?
Elephant.
An elephant? Whatever, okay. An elephant. And a whale as well. Showing a whale for a good. And so Narayan says, all right, okay, my boy, I will follow your instructions. So he tells the Brahmin. The Brahmin says, so what is the good news? What's the good news? He said, well, Lord Narayan is very pleased with your service, but you still have a couple more lifetimes to go. He said, that's what? I bet you didn't even see him. That's not possible. I know the Shastra. I know what I'm doing. There's no question I'm going back now after this lifetime. He said, what? Prove to me that you saw him. Tell me what he was doing. He said, well, actually, he was threading an elephant and a camel through the eye of a needle. And he said, that's impossible. You're bogus. You just come around playing your vina and you say anything. How am I to believe in this? So then he goes to see it. He said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's the news. So then he goes to see the cobbler. And the cobbler greets him very nicely, gives him a sitting place and everything, offers him something to drink. And then he says, well, the cobbler says, well, did you have a chance to talk to Lord Narayan about when I can expect? Is it a while? A few more lifetimes? No. Lord Narayan says he's very pleased with you and we'll be going back this lifetime. He said, my Lord is so wonderful. What was he doing while we were there? He said, well, he was threading an elephant and a camel in the eye of a needle. And he said, my Lord is so wonderful. Yeah, he's so amazing. Every day he amazes me. He said, do you find that hard to accept that he's not done such a thing? And he said, no, why should I? And he was sitting underneath, I think it was a banyan tree. And, but it could be any kind of tree. It could be a mango tree, whatever. Or an apple tree, more identifiable here. So he says, you see this fruit that comes from the tree? Inside this fruit, there's a tiny seed, very small. Inside that seed is another tree packed in there. And then that tree will grow and it will produce more fruits. And each one of them will have seeds. And each one of them will have trees. So basically, in this seed, there is a forest. That's what my Lord has done. So, that's real education.
Yes.
Understanding and appreciating the wonders of Krishna's creation.
Yes. And such a wonderful story. Also showing the firm faith of the cobbler. His faith was so strong, he could understand Christian can do anything. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the story. We all have these, right? Generally speaking, most of us have one of these.
I don't.
You don't have one. Good. I think you're the only one. Maybe Dweebucha.
Yeah, he doesn't have
He
one.
doesn't have one. But if the living entities in the material world could become as attached to Krishna as they are to their phones,
Yeah.
if they can become,
A lot of that.
when someone loses their phone, if they could be in as much anxiety when they lose Krishna. I'm just saying, these things, people, just tell the next person you meet, if that phone was Krishna, it was God, and you didn't have that for a day, they're freaking out, they feel like they've lost everything, how they're going to go on. That's how we should feel about Krishna. Yes, Boo.
And if they have their phone, they could be into such deep samadhi, looking at it, they can walk into a telephone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a story that people have shown on YouTube that people are looking at their phones and they actually walk down into a manhole or something like that. Or walk out into traffic. They're so absorbed in it. But what I find interesting is, and I don't fly that much anymore, is the way they react when the pilot says, turn off your phones. And then all of a sudden, when they can turn them back on, they're like, straight crap.
So dependent on something mechanical. But devotees are utilizing their phones, they're utilizing YouTube, they're utilizing Facebook so much. Devotees are preaching like anything now via the internet. That's proper utilization of these things. But to be in anxiety about it, anyway, we're always say, now end on this, we're so fortunate. Let's always be willing and eager to spread our good fortune. Time for prasad. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.